everybody. Welcome to this week's campfire. And this one, I wanted to be a little light on software. In fact, we're not going to open up any software at all. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and I hope it's one of your favorites too. And it has to do with cinematic lighting, because lighting is everything to an artist. Without light, you obviously have nothing. So what you really want to do to become a top-notch artist is really appreciate how lighting affects the message and the mood of whatever you're creating. And you don't have to be a lighting artist to take this into account. Even an illustrator should be considering lighting, or a storyboard artist. And just the subtle differences in cinematic lighting as far as the power, the intensity, the color, the direction, all these things really just change the way audience is ingesting that scene and what they're meant to take away from it. And I found this chapter from one of our courses called Lighting and Rendering, and it has to do with cinematic lighting, and it goes through some of my favorite films, and I'd love to share it with you. So enjoy this little chat on cinematic lighting, and I'll see you in the next campfire. Ciao. Hey, welcome back. Before we get into any kind of analysis of lighting and lighting in visual effects, and we're actually analyzing lighting in CG movies as well, full CG movies like animated films and stuff, let's actually just take a look at some examples of lighting and just figure out why it's making us feel the way it is, and perhaps analyze a little bit about why is it doing that and how is it doing that, right? So taking a look at some lighting examples, here's a first shot from a movie called Amelie. Amelie was a 2001 French film by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and fantastic, wonderful movie. You should definitely check it out. But there's lots of scenes in Amelie where it has this wonderful, incandescent, warm glow to it. And the reason why you're seeing so much of that in the movie is because she's a fairly happy character. And what they're actually trying to do is they're showing you not how Paris actually is, but an idealized version of Paris, almost a fantasy version of Paris. You know, it's kind of funny when you're watching television shows, you know, like CSI and some of those cop shows on TV and whatever, there's a color palette that you inherently think about when they're in a new location. And for some reason, it just seems to be a trigger for people to say, oh yeah, I'm in, New Orleans, it's going to be, kind of this golden, orangey color. I'm in New York, it's got to be blue. Why? Is New York more blue than New Orleans? Of course not. But, it's kind of these visual clues that we kind of seem to take for granted, right? Same thing with if you're actually looking at a night shot. People think, well, how do you color a night shot? Well, of course, it's naturally all blue. It's not. There are no less colors at night than during the day. However, our eyes perceive the colors differently. So a lot of this is perception. So a movie like Amelie has these wonderful values and these warm incandescent values that really just give it almost this fantasy kind of feel to this movie because of the saturation, which is, how intense are the colors? What is the tonal palette of the colors? What is the luminosity of the values? See, they're kind of blown out over here, and they're, on the side. So looking at all that gives you a certain feel for that movie. Taking color as an example of what we're talking about, here's another shot from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, which came out in 2011. Directed by David Yates. And Harry is visiting Dumbledore in the afterlife. Okay, and as you can see, when people think, what does the afterlife look like cinematically? Well, everybody seems to use the same kind of concept, right? Well, it's very bright and it's very white and it seems peaceful and everything's kind of glowing. Where do these cinematic conventions come from? Well, the fact that it's been shown that way in movies for the past 120 years, right? So that's part of it, as well as some other experiences that some people may say they have, with after-death or near-death experiences and things like that nature. But taking a look at, say, this shot, Harry and Dumbledore walking around, soft, diffuse glow, right? You can't really make out the environment. The lighting is almost completely blown out. You're in an overexposed photo, right? The edges are very soft. There's no harsh shadows. There's no shadows at all, actually, if you take a look at it, right? Apart from the very, very small contact shadows that are around Harry and Voldemort's feet, right? So lighting plays a huge role in this. And if you just showed someone this shot without even asking them, where are these two people? And they wouldn't even know who these two people are. They could say, oh, they're in heaven, right? Because lighting played that so far to the hilt, right? You don't even know where the lighting is coming from. It's just basically coming from everywhere and nowhere all at the same time, right? Not a dangerous place to be. Seems very peaceful and seems very pure and clean, right? So lighting plays a huge role in something like that. Now, taking a look at some other films, here is a couple of shots that some of you may recognize from The Matrix. When you're in The Matrix, if you watch those films, The Matrix is very green, okay? That is an instantaneous clue to show you where you are in the universe of this cinematic experience, right? All over the place, when you're in The Matrix, there's these green overtones all over the place. Almost this kind of uneasy feeling. We're going to talk about, the color wheel here in a second and how different colors make you feel. But green is pretty predominant color to give someone the feeling of unease or something's not quite right or disgust a little bit. And The Matrix here is showing you that this color green, which permeates the fact that they're in an artificial environment, i.e. The Matrix, it's not real. It's artificial. There's something wrong with all of this going on. It's driven by a computer, et cetera, et cetera. So consider that every time they're in the Matrix, it's very, very green. And then take a look at perhaps some other shots from the same movie where perhaps they're in the real world and they're in the city and they're having a big party and there's lots of great music. There's no green in those shots at all, is there? They're having a rave. Everybody's happy. Now we have orange and warm tones and wonderful saturation and all kinds of great stuff happening there. Okay, so color plays a huge role. Color is like a character in the film, showing you what's going on and possibly what's coming up, right? Going back to some older films, Nosferatu, 1922 by by Murnau, starring the incredible Max Schreck, which, oddly enough, Schreck is the German word for fright, or so I'm told, right? So Nosferatu, a great example of German expressionism, black and white, right? And fantastic use of light and shadow, right? It's a horror film. Max Schreck playing basically Dracula is not a nice guy. He's not going to be lit like a nice guy, right? And we're going to talk about how to light for horror, how to light for comedies, how to light in different ways to give you the effect that you're looking to achieve. Another horror film, I wouldn't say a horror film, a suspense film by David Fincher, one of the classics, called Seven. Seven came out in 1995, and this is a tour de force film that every cinematic fan really needs to watch. Fantastic tonal values, fantastic cinematography. When we talk about the cinematography, we're talking about the DP, the director of photography, who's responsible for lighting and lenses on set. And a lot of this movie is completely desaturated. It's grit, it's dirty, it's uneasy, right? So saturation plays a huge role in the lighting of this film. It's not a nice city to live in. It's always raining. It's miserable. The characters are miserable. There's a murderer on the loose. There's not much happening here that's to be happy about. So the lighting is going to play into that. Going back to black and white again, here's a shot from The Third Man starring Orson Welles. Third Man came out in 1949 and directed by Carol Reed and has a fantastic soundtrack that everybody seems to love as well, starring Joseph Cotten and Orson Welles. And at the end of the movie, I don't want to give anything away, but Orson Welles is running around the sewers of Vienna, and the lighting is basically, it's very symbolic. So lighting can be very, very symbolic. We just saw lighting in the Harry Potter shot, which kind of showed purity and cleanness and peace. And, you could almost denote that the lighting was kind of symbolic of a godlike kind of figure. That's going to give you a little peace of mind. Here is almost the exact opposite. It's also fairly overexposed with a little bit of bloom, right? But what you're also seeing is that the lighting isn't so much a peaceful thing to run to. The lighting is actually something he's running away from because it's the people who are searching for him and they're going to bring him to justice, whether it's jail or maybe shooting him. So the lighting here isn't just symbolic of the end of the movie and the people that, that are coming for him finally, But again, the afterlife is so to speak, hunting him down and about to bring him to his final and ultimate destination. Here's another great shot before we talk about the color wheel. And this is a shot from Toy Story 4, right? And just looking at this shot, we don't need any kind of expert analysis on what's going on in the story, right? We just know that right now, these two characters are not in probably the place that they would most likely want to be in and be comfortable for the night, right? They're out in the middle of nowhere. It's very desaturated. There's a lot of blue. The colors are muted. They're by themselves. They're a little bit lost. They're, walking to wherever they need to get to, and it's not a super positive place to be, right? So the lighting is going to show that. Now, that's not to say they're scared. If they're scared, maybe you're going to play up the shadows, right? But it's maybe a little bit cold. It's a little bit desolate, and the lighting and the color palette and how it's handled will achieve all that for you. In the next video, we're going to talk a little bit about our good friend Robert Plutchik and his Wheel of Emotions. See you in a minute.